Now, welcome along. So, GAA season rattles along as it tends to do these days. Round 2 of the round robin group stages is upon us. Happy to say here in studio, Colm Keys of the paper, the Irish Independent, of course, here. Colm, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Joe.
And once again, Tomás O'Shea with us as well. Hey, Tomás.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good. Our GAA coverage on the podcast with thanks to AIB at the heart of Gaelic games across both club and county. And in 2025, they're celebrating a decade of sponsoring the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. And this year, with it turning out to be the most competitive championship in years, AIB more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. You can check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. So we'll glance a little bit back, but we'll mainly look ahead, I think. So round 2... Saturday we've Tyrone Mayo, 7 o'clock, Healy Park, contrasting vibes around those two sides. We have Roscommon Meath down against Louth. Cork Kerry, a little bit under the radar. Porky Quay, 4:45 on the Saturday. Really everybody is looking towards Sunday. Dublin Armagh just jumps off the page. Croke Park, 4 o'clock. It's on the TV. Tomás, I know you're on the coverage. Remarkably, under Kieran McGeeney's reign, first time playing Dublin in the Championship. 2010, the last time they came across each other in the Championship. Also, though, you have Derry Galway, which is interesting for obvious reasons, both coming off a loss. Monaghan Clare, Cavan, Donegal. So that's where we are across the weekend. So shaping up very nicely. Just an apropos of nothing. This is a real tangent, but I just came across it on a clip on Instagram of the Humans of Gaelic Football page. And I thought it was very interesting. Carl Dillon was talking about the way we coach the solo in Gaelic football. I know this is quite a niche topic, everyone, but we won't dwell on it overly, but I thought it was interesting. So Carl Dillon was basically saying, and I was of this school, that in the same way that if you're kicking off your right foot, you drop the ball off your right hand, and vice versa, left hand onto left foot if you're kicking. He was saying the way we teach the solo actually could be wrong, that you should be dropping from your opposite hand onto your opposite foot. And that kind of goes with the mechanics of running. And you popped up, Tomás, as one of the people he mentioned who did it that way or does it that way. He said that James O'Donoghue had first said it to him, like, you're doing it wrong. It's meant to be opposite. That's the way we run. That's the way the body mechanics move. And you came up as one of the people he mentioned. Quite a few Kerry players were mentioned. So I was curious, had you been doing this consciously? Was this a thought out thing or was just instinctive? Did you always solo it opposite hand, opposite foot? Or is all of this news to you?
I've heard it before, but it wasn't pointed out that this is the way you do it. I just was I can't even remember when I started doing it, or did I do it from the start or not. I've been asked a question before, and it's very simple. I found you could run quicker and have more control because you could drop your left hand more comfortably lower and drop it onto your right boot. It would just work better when you were moving at fast pace. And I know when you're still and you're a Maurice Fitzgerald and you're trying to pull dummy solos, but you're kind of stopped while you're pulling those dummies, it makes more sense to drop with your right hand. But I just felt there was more control in my solo at full pelt, dropping it from my left hand. So, and Joe, I don't think, I thought that's as much as I've ever spoken about it or thought it out. It was I just did it all the time. It wasn't a coach that told me. It wasn't something that I decided one day after trying it in the back garden. I must have been doing it all the time, I'd say. And I didn't know that the lads do it. I never gave it much thought. I would have had less control than Mark would have had, maybe with skills wise, but I tended to go on a few solo runs, and I just felt that it was more control, but I don't think it was anything conscious or anything coached into me.
Interesting. Well, I think it turns out you were onto something, because when you think about how you run, even without a ball, your right hand and your left foot are going forward together. You know, you don't put your right hand and your right foot together like a march. So having that right hand out as your left foot's going forward, that kind of adds up. So I can see how you stumbled upon it. But turns out there's people with PhDs trying to work this out, and you were ahead of the curve.
I should have. Can we start this again? I'll come at it from a different angle.
Yeah. Hours of study.
You should patent it, Tomás. You should have patented that solo.
Because there had to be other fellas who were doing it.
He mentioned a few. He mentioned in the clip. He mentioned O'Donoghue. He mentioned Declan O'Sullivan. And somebody else, well, another Kerry player. But I would think your average kid isn't being taught it that way, actually. Oh, I don't know what the teaching is across the country, but it does make sense.
It does when you say it, Joe.
Your,
But when
your
you do
left
it,
hand,
I was just as you're talking there. I'm thinking, well, and the ball is it's coming out of the right hand. That's the natural instinct. You're right-footed, and it's coming out of your right hand. That's the way it feels. Same with the left hand. So
'Cause you'd certainly kick that way. I mean, you'd never drop it opposite hand onto opposite foot. So I think they say, well, if that's the way to kick it, that's the way to solo it. But actually, maybe not. Sorry,
has
Tomás.
David Clifford got that in his locker? Because I remember David Clifford scoring. I remember him scoring a goal against Cavan in a minor semi-final. I think it was 17, and he soloed on his left, he soloed on one foot, and he turned onto his left, and I think that was opposite hand, opposite foot.
Clifford was mentioned as another proponent. Yeah,
he might not always do it, but he has that in his locker.
Yeah, you were coming back in, Tomás.
no, I was just saying that if you were trying to keep your head up as you were soloing as well, it's easier to do that while you're dropping with the left hand.
Very good. Okay.
So if you were in full sway or full pelt, you could actually keep your head up while also soloing at the same time. You just had more control. It's not to say that you'd lose control or anything, but you'd have more control if you were dropping with the left.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I saw that clip and I thought it was interesting. Everybody will take note of that watching the football at the weekend now and be boring the people beside them as they talk about it. The Tyrone 20s, we should mention, last night they beat Louth on a scoreline of 5-16 to 17 points at the Athletic Grounds. So Owen McElhone, who's already making waves at senior level, scored 2-4. Noah Grimes scored 2-6. Tomás, you know all about them, obviously. We talked to you last week about the Tyrone 20s beating your Kerry 20s. You were very impressed with them, kind of an edge to them. A very clinical team as well, don't concede many goals. The point has been made, Will, our colleague here, mentioned it. Any team that's won 3 in this kind of 3 or 4 year period, the only 3 times it's kind of happened at 20s in Gaelic football, Kerry in the 70s, and you know what became of that team, Cork in the 80s, won 2 All-Irelands, another few finals besides, and Dublin ahead of the 2010s. So are we headed for, are the 2030s going to be Tyrone dominance here, Tomás?
Kerry did it as well in the 90s. Sure, the 95, 96 they won it. We got to semi-final in 97. We won it in 98, and we got to another final in 99. So you're right, it does. It leads well, and it augurs well for the seniors up along. The fact that you win, I think you always look back at photos on the wall and you see at least 6, 7 that'll step up. They won't all step up. And there's serious, like Grimes stepped up last night, but McCullough and McElhone have been the 2 forwards. But you have O'Neill at midfield. You have defenders that'll pop up. They didn't concede a goal. It's really, they've done really well even at schools level the last number of years. They've won a couple of Hogan Cups. So the talent is coming at the right time, and their seniors are doing well enough as is. So you'd imagine the next 2 or 3 years, you'll see a lot of these fellas being brought into the squads, and the step up is huge, obviously, from 20 to seniors, but a lot of them will make it, I feel. They have, you said it there, they're clinical up front. They don't concede a whole pile of goals. They put a huge amount of effort into their defensive play. They take pride in not conceding goals, I would say, but Jesus, do they hurt you going up? Like, Louth had way more chances, I'd imagine. I didn't see any stats, but it's just how clinical they are and the quality of, like it was Grimes. Grimes hadn't stood out as much as McElhone or McCullough all season, even though he is an excellent footballer. But in the first half there, he was the fella that kept him ticking over. But we were discussing before we came on air, McElhone's a young fella, I suppose, that they were trying to mind and trying to balance throughout the season between the 20s and the seniors. He could slot straight into the senior team the way he's going. He came on against Armagh and looked dangerous, and Canavan is taking up an awful lot of time you can see it, the teams are marking him and double teaming him at times. So there's an amount of focus on him, which leaves maybe other lads with less focus on him. So I think we haven't seen the end of McElhone for the season ahead either.
You mentioned the trends of those teams, even with Tyrone. Tyrone have won back-to-back All-Ireland under 2021 titles. on a few occasions now, but they won in 1991 and 92. They won them. That was the team of Peter Canavan and Adrian Cush. And they were contesting All Ireland finals. 1995, they reached the semi-final. 96, didn't win them. On the basis of that team, and the progression from the 2000 and 2001 under 21 winning teams, they won All Ireland titles. That spawned 2003, by and large, 03, 05. Now, Peter Canavan was still there at that stage, and 08. 2015, they beat Tipperary in an All Ireland under 21 final, and a lot of those players graduated and with the basis of 2021. So there's a pathway all the time there for Tyrone teams that win under 20 titles, that they go on within a few years and at least contest All Ireland finals, but in recent years have been winning them too. And as Tomás says, the school's performance, I think, wasn't it Mercy Mount Hawk this year that were really, really fancied from Tralee to win the Hogan Cup, and they were taken out by one of the Tyrone teams. Right. So it's phenomenal what they're doing. It's phenomenal what they're doing across their clubs and everything. Last night, I don't think I have seen a team so soundly beaten at midfield by the two loud midfielders I thought were outstanding, Sean Callahan and James Maguire, and yet the ease with which Tyrone were able to, I'd say, a lot less possession. The economy of their play is just something else.
Yeah. Funny, Tomás, you mentioned it last week, and I got a text from somebody saying there's no way he meant to say that. You said that with the current rules, you felt you could get cleaned out at midfield and still win. And it caught my ear as well. Could you expand on why that is? Because that feels so counterintuitive. I'm watching the rules now and teams get a run on you in midfield and it seems like the whole game goes away from you. So you feel you can get away with that?
It's not that you can get away with it. You shouldn't get away with it. You shouldn't. But I'm only going on, like, we played a couple of challenge games with the 20s, and we played, there are before, and it doesn't make sense because when you lose a kick out, especially your own kick out, you're under severe pressure. But it was a case that we were looking at stats after and we got absolutely clean, yet we won the game. So we were trying to figure out how, and the reason why was that we were very well organised from a defensive point of view. We were back in position and we were getting real heat on the ball nearly immediately after losing it in the centre of the field. Now, if you couple that then with a team maybe that wouldn't be as good attacking or taking advantage of the fact that they had one possession, and maybe if they go backwards, then you'll see why maybe they eventually lose possession, we turn them over, or else they kick a wide, but they weren't hurting us on the scoreboard. It happened, I think, 3 times during the season where we got comprehensively beaten at midfield. Yet no, I suppose, look, at senior level, you can see it there where there's teams, their wides are very low. So their ratio of shooting and scoring from shots taken is different. And maybe it is different as compared to senior to 20s. But that happened to us a number of times. So when you'd be coaching it that way as well, that even if you do lose possession in around the middle of the field, that the far side will be squeezing in, or that you'll be getting heat on the ball and trying to turn them over as quick as you can.
Okay, interesting. Dublin, Armagh, Croke Park, 4 o'clock. Whole country's stopping for this one, I think, if you're into your football at all. It's just beautifully set up, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 winners from the first round of the qualifiers. Obviously, Dublin got that win down in Galway. Won't say it was against the head. You could never say a Dublin win was against the head, but coming off the back of that Meath result, there was always going to be a response from Dublin. And it was a really strong response. And for them to go to Galway and win, away from Croke Park and win as they did. And I thought there were probably value for a little bit more on that particular day. Sets them right up. But I think this Armagh team, and I looked at their Derry game since, their ability to come off a defeat too. They've come off 3 Ulster final defeats that have gone to extra time. 2 have gone to penalties. And it hasn't taken anything out of them. You have to say, the way they have bounced out each time, it hasn't taken. They've gone into the toughest groups every time. Armagh have been in the toughest group. They've been they've been with Galway every year. The last 3 years they've been, including this year, and they've bounced out of it. And just that level of resilience that they haven't lost a game, a championship game, in normal time since 2022. They've played 24 championship games now against some of the best opposition. As I said, they're playing out of Ulster. They're in the toughest group. They're into quarterfinals of last year's semi and final where they played Kerry and Galway. So they're playing very, very, very strong opposition. And they're something like 1,100 days without losing a game. No one else has that in that same period of time. So they've made themselves really, really hard to beat. And they've changed their team so much since last year. It's almost a retrofit for the new rules.
And I suppose, Tomás, the constant there is McGeeney. And it's hard not to think the teams, are built in the image of their manager. Is he someone that you've got to know at all through international rules tours or all-star trips or just within the kind of GAA architecture? Do you have a sense of McGeeney, the person?
I can't say that I do, Joe. I would have played alongside him in the Aussie rules. And I know there's a perception out there that there wouldn't be a whole pile of fun involved with him. But he is a very interesting character, and there's a bit of crack in him as well. And I think there's an obsessive side to him as a player, and as a manager as well, I would say. And I think it took him so long. 2002 was huge, but I'd say if you ask any of the former Armagh players, McGeeney drove an awful amount of stuff on and off the field as well. And I'd say the respect that he holds above there. And when you rewind thereafter a few good years, but it was last year that there was lads looking for his head above there. I think his greatest ability, we've spoken about it there. They've been beat in huge games. Whatever he has, and I know they're a very good coaching ticket. They have a very good, they're a really well-coached team. They're a very well-drilled coached team in terms of the kickouts. Look at the way they break down teams. They look for the quick one. If it's not on, they're very comfortable. And every player, like they don't have a marquee forward, people will say, but there's always getting shots off, and they're accurate enough as well. They never put their head down. And you have good coaches there. I know you do, but I'll bring it back. It's McGeeney that has to steer the whole ship. It's McGeeney that has to pick him off the ground. And what I find most impressive is he's there so long. Like the Kildare lads would still talk about how it was a mistake to let him go. Like it's seldom that you'd have a manager that would stay that long. You're talking a handful of fellas like the Harts and the Codys and I'm not comparing them in terms of success, but there's a want from the players and he has a respect. I think he has been the key factor in Armagh being where they are. He when it comes to winning, he lacks ego in the fact that, and I don't know for sure, but that he lets the lads go away and coach away. And there's three of them above there from a defensive point of view and an attacking point of view, and he lets them off. And I'd imagine that he has a grip over everything that's happening anyway, but he lets them drive the sessions. But it's him that drives the whole lot, and it's him that has the connection with the players, and it's him that the lads... and I, if you ask me, I've got to know him down the years. My brother Dara know him very well, has great time for him. I'd have very good time for him. I think he respects the old traditions of Gaelic football. He played in the days where the North were not that successful, and he saw what was happening down south and the success that was happening down south, yet he was part of an Armagh team that won. And then afterwards it comes full circle, and he's the next man then that's in charge as well when they win it. And now he's after coming back, and I definitely thought, I think I said it last week, I thought Armagh are a team that there's so much effort goes into maybe keeping them on the straight and narrow that after winning there will be a drop off. Even without planning it, they'll still try to do the best they can. There will be a drop off and they'll suffer, and I've totally changed my mind on that. I think that they'll be thereabouts. I don't think they'll fear anybody, and if they can get everybody available to them. But I think that team is basically moulded on the character of McGeeney fully.
It feels that way. And a last one on him. Do you remember in those international rules dressing rooms, was he one of the real standout leaders? Was he a commanding presence even that in that company, or not so much?
I unfortunately, like sometimes when there was a long season, a lot of the time Kerry would have gone towards the end that time, so we would have been late coming into the squads, and we would have been late coming in for trials. McGeeney, I think, was captain at the time, and we played the first half, and Paul McGrain got cut above the eye, or he got a belt somehow anyway. And I remember McGeeney lost a plot because, and he mentioned the fact that it was a teammate of his, not the fact that he was from Armagh, but that he was an Irish teammate of his, and there was no way. He put it in those uncertain terms. There was no way he was going to stand around and watch this happen. I was there thinking, Jesus, I wish my brother and a few more Kerry fellas would look after me like that, or care for me. But they did. But I just remember him standing out, and he just took everything so serious. But I remember the other side of it is socialising with him afterwards and seeing a completely different side of him, because we only saw what was on the field. But he was an absolutely, you could tell chatting to him as well. And I suppose it's gone. But he was always trying to, I'd say, soak up what fellas that had a little bit of success. I got that impression for him that he would do anything to learn or anything to gain an advantage or gain an extra step. But he was an out and out leader, and that Armagh team in 2000, 2001, 2002, they were a serious team, and he was again the man that stood above all on the team, you know.
So he's Colm like almost untouchable in Armagh in terms of what he's managed to do here, player into now management. It's phenomenal. Where is Dessie, do you think, in the eyes of Dublin fans?
Dessie Farrell has done well for Dublin. He's managing a period of great departure. You lose Brian Fenton, you lose the calibre of players this year, and obviously it's been happening since. You're coming off the 5 in a row that became 6 in a row as his man. He's managed Dublin to 2 All-Ireland titles.
See, I don't think as a two-time All-Ireland winning manager, I wouldn't say he gets much credit.
He probably doesn't, and he's also won under 21 titles as well with Dublin. He's accumulated a couple of those in 14 and 17. So he's done well. But I think Dublin never panic and never have panicked too much about managements. But I imagine if they don't go deep into the season this year, he'll be reflecting hard on it, and Dublin will be reflecting hard on it, that perhaps a change is best here. And I think that would be fair enough. Standards are very, very high in Dublin, and that's the legacy of the last decade. And I think Dublin would be looking around, and he would be looking at it too. As I said, if they don't go deep into the season with a clear footprint to the future, and he is introducing a lot of players, and that was a very significant result in Galway.
Yeah.
Underpinned, of course, by Kieran Kilkenny's performance that day, which was one of his best. And I always find Kilkenny, even in the years when they dipped after 2020, 2021 and 2022, he was their best player. And from memory, he was their only All-Star, and he was merited on both occasions. He carried them through very choppy times, especially if you remember 2021, they had the bottom hadn't fallen out of them, but their performance had dipped immeasurably. And it was Kieran Kilkenny who drove on in both years. Probably suffered a loss of form in 2023. Then there was a period when he wasn't on the team. But he's picked up again, and he really rallied to the cause, as they all did. So that takes a fair degree of good management to be able to draw that response against players, to come down to the home of the All-Ireland finalists, the 4-time Connacht champions, and to get that response. Now, I think they're stepping up again here because, as I said, I think Armagh have just bounced out. I think they're a better team than last year. I think they've introduced elements of pace to suit the new game. If you look at Ross McQuillan, who was only a sub coming off the bench last year, he's been terrific for them this year. From half-back, 12 points this year. Jarlath O'Byrne, same, coming in off the bench, making his impact. But again, type of players in open space can really exploit, get you up the pitch 20, 30, 40 metres maybe. They do that. And there's a new player called Darragh McMullen, and he's really, really exciting. Great ball carrier, head-up player. Again, where has he come from? He was on the fringes last year, but because his pace, his ball carrying ability, with the solo and go and getting ahead of the traffic and the congestion, he's able to do that. So, you know, the team is really, really suiting the new rules, and they've Rian O'Neill back as well.
On Dessie, Tomás, and this is possibly kind of unfair, right? It's an unfair interpretation of his time. But just for the sake of the argument, the unfair interpretation will be, well, he came in and he won that first All-Ireland on the fumes of the Jim Gavin team. All the same habits were there, strange time with COVID, and they got over the line. And then absolutely a few legends depart, but there's a sense that standards slip. I always remember listening to Paul Flynn at the time in that dip saying, look, Dublin are giving away cheap frees the way they never used to. You know, Jim Gavin wouldn't kill us for giving away cheap frees. You tackled properly. And that was emblematic of standards slipping. And Dessie couldn't seem to turn that around. And then Cluxton and Mannion, they all come back, and it's one kind of last dance. And there's a sense they're kind of running the ship culturally anyway. They're imposing the standards in the dressing room. And now they're gone. And it's like, okay, back to you, Dessie. What can you do? So I feel like there's a kind of unproven aspect to a two-time All-Ireland winning manager, which again I appreciate is an unfair way of positing it. But I think that perception is out there with the Dubs.
So when they're going well, it's the players, and when they're not, it's Dessie. Kind of,
yeah, kind of. That's the unfairness of it, yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't agree with that at all. I think, look, and the same way that when Jim Gavin was going so well for so long, there was still an amount, I would imagine, involved in managing that team and making sure that they were as successful as they were. Just because you have the players doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the success, but it does make it easier. I would say, and I know there's no way, like you Fenton this year alone, Fenton, McCaffrey, McCarthy, Mannion, McFitz, and as well as what they do on the field, take off the field and the culture that they have created and worked so hard at creating, that's gone. And I think what's lost on a lot of people, and you see it in Mayo, I think, and you possibly saw it in Tyrone, and you possibly saw it in Kerry, is when you come out of a time where there's a very, very good team, then the same level of expectation, unfortunately, be it with fans or be it with media or be it in the general public, and you have a different era now with everybody having a voice. I think it adds that little bit more pressure, and it's not warranted because, with all due respect, and I said it before, after the Meath game especially, I think they came in for heavy criticism, and they came back and they bounced against Galway, and I agree it was a very good performance. But I looked at both games this week, and I was looking at Dublin, and you'd say, whoa, Jesus, they really improved on their own kickouts big time, because Cluxton got absolutely smashed against Meath. They improved no end in how direct and how pacey they were up front, and less mistakes and good shots. They were very good up front. But I still think there's issues at the back. And no matter what way you go, Joe, it'll always come back to the point that they don't have the same calibre. And I'd argue this with anybody. They don't have the same calibre of player that they did. And ultimately, it'll come back. Big moments in big games, they were renowned for it. But they had an unbelievable set of players each year. And I'm not saying, and it's not writing them off, or it's not saying that they're not capable of it, but there are a crop of players in Dublin right now that don't have the same level of consistency like that the Kilkennys have in the bank already. That if they have a poor performance, then they're kind of written off, and maybe wrongly so. But I think you're dealing with a different set of players, and then when you bring the management into that, I think it was always going to be a tough suit to follow Jim Gavin. It was always going to be a very, very hard. But I do know from knowing Dublin lads who are really GAA hardcore and know their football and know what's involved, they've always said it, that Dessie, Jim Gavin, and his name, who brought him to the first one?
Pat Gilroy.
Gilroy, they're the three main men in Dublin football in the last 15 to 20 years. And I would say you could make the argument that standards have slipped, but I don't think you're dealing with like. I think you're dealing with a different set of players. And I think I'd have fierce time for Dessie on a coaching level and on a management level, because in many ways it was an awful gig to follow on. And I don't think, like, you still have Kilkenny, you have Conn, you have Howard, you have Bugler, you have Cluxton inside there. Like, there's still an awful lot of leadership there, and they still have the same know-how. But you don't have, you had 15 problems all over the field. I don't think that's the case now. if that makes sense.
No, it does, and that is hard to hold against any manager. Fellas, it sounds like you're both leaning fairly comfortably for Armagh to head down to Croke and Dublin and win and head back up the road.
I am, Manny. I wouldn't say comfortable. I don't think you'd ever get anything comfortable off Dublin in Croke Park. I mean, Galway beat them last year. It was by a point. They got them in the end. Dublin took off in front. Big question for me is whether Con O'Callaghan plays. He limped off against Galway. If Con O'Callaghan is not right for Dublin, that's a huge chunk. He's not easily replaceable. Players missing in Armagh, much more replaceable, because I think Armagh have the deepest squad of anyone left in the championship. It's remarkable too, and I have to point out, on the back of very, very little underage success. By comparison, we spoke earlier about Tyrone, and Dublin have had it obviously in the last decade too, but no underage footprint for Armagh. So it's another testament really to Kieran McGeeney and his coaching team that they've got as much. But I am leaning towards Armagh because I think that injection of pace will be a measure for Dublin.
Yeah, I suppose the one caveat, Tomás, you'd say is you wouldn't have fancied Dublin after the performance against Meath. So if they improve as much from the Galway performance as they did from the Meath performance, and they come out in front of their home fans, then we'll all be kind of here next week going, okay, things are, Dublin are a different animal to what we think.
Yeah, I definitely, I'd agree with Colm. You're not writing off Dublin in any form. You're not saying that they're not capable of beating nearly every team on their day. But I think with Armagh, it will be their first time. I think if Galway look back at the Dublin game, they'll be disappointed with an awful amount of their game in that match. Armagh, I think, are a different prospect for Dublin. I think it's going to be hyped. It's in Croke Park. Dublin are after a win. The expectation is probably that little bit more alive than it was maybe 2 weeks ago after Meath. So I think that expectation to back up what happened in Galway now, tighten up more defence, which they're well capable of doing, I'd imagine. But then I'd agree with Colm, like what Armagh do without having the same success at underage level. And I've heard stories that McGeeney handpicks fellas from underage who are handpicked by coaches he trusts as ingredient men that will come on board and will do a job, and they work hard with them, really, really hard and obsessively with them to make sure they're right coming in at senior level. Okay. And I'd say that is down to McGeeney, again, making sure that there's a flow coming through. But I think it's going to be a cracker of a game, I'll be honest with you. And I'm hoping, and I've no doubt that they will. I think Dublin will show up, and I think Dublin will give a huge performance. And I think it's going to be a tight match.
Okay, good. We'll sign up for that. Just a quick word, we can't go through every game, but seeing as it's on in the group, Galway away to Derry on the back of the defeat to Dublin and with Armagh to come. Like, you'd make Galway favourites, obviously, but that is just treacherous under the circumstances, isn't it?
It really is. This group with 4 heavyweights, and I still class Derry as a heavyweight team. They've been relegated, but they were league champions last year and then All-Ireland semi-finals in the recent stretch. But they've probably gone off the boil a little bit. There's no doubt about that. I think they're missing the pace, the go forward that Gareth McKinless and Conor McCluskey especially gave them. They're 2 of the best and quickest ball carriers, and they're really missing them because Conor Glass is still playing very well for them, Brendan Rodgers, Ethan Doherty, but those 2 elements and maybe some of those what I would call auxiliary forwards that really excelled themselves in 2022 and 2023 and even during the league last year, there were players that you wouldn't have expected would get to the levels that they got, and they're probably not going as well. Derry were 13 points adrift of Armagh at one stage. They got a few goals late on. Conor Glass got 1. They had a few opportunities too. Ethan Rafferty made a lot of saves. But there's nothing to suggest in their form that they will beat Galway. Having said that, Galway are coming off the back of a defeat to Dublin, and they're going to a place where they only drew in the league this year. I think it was Derry's only point. So it is with some trepidation. I think Shane Walsh will be better for coming back after injury. He didn't really show it all against Dublin. One very good 2-pointer, but you'd expect him to improve. You'd expect Matthew Tierney to step up again. You expect Galway, I expect Galway to get it done. But again, you're not just dismissing Derry at home with everything to fight. Derry don't want to go down. Obviously, neither team, they've both lost their first rounds, having to go playing Dublin, looking for something to stay in the championship, but not even a guarantee that they will.
Yeah. I know their league form was dire, but there were certain odd games. Kerry got out of jail there in Derry. You know, it could have been a slightly better looking league. It's a sticky one for Galway, Tomás, under the circumstances.
I think it is, yeah. I think, and look, it is kind of reactive. You go on game to game, and there would have been an awful amount of people's favourites early on. But I just think defensively, maybe, and from an attacking point of view, that they need Shane Walsh flying, they need Comer in the team regularly, they need their top men constantly. They played, I don't know who it was again, they played previous to was it the Mayo game where they dominated midfield, yet against Dublin, they were beating midfield, and everybody was talking about the physicality they had around the middle of the park and how they were picking out wing forwards and isolating them. So teams are obviously doing their homework, and the fact that you have, it's part of the new rules, like you can focus in on so much of their strengths from long kickouts and go after it and make huge improvements in one game, which is brilliant to see. But I think Porridge Ice won't be happy, and you could sense it in him after the game. Yes, he was giving out that people underestimated Dublin, but you could sense that he was disappointed in his own lads. And I'd say I think there will be a reaction from Galway, and I think you'll see Galway doing well this weekend.
Okay. Tyrone, Mayo, Healy Park. Tyrone off the back of beating Donegal. Mayo, obviously. The Cavan defeat bad enough, but then what's happened to Kevin McStay is obviously desperately sad, and everybody goes without saying wishes him well. He took ill after a training session, and he's stepping back now for the season. And it's just, you know, a job he wanted for so long. It's been a tough period to take over Mayo. He wanted the job earlier, I'm sure, in his life, and now to step back in these circumstances is really, really dreadful pity for him. Stephen Rochford, who is the current assistant manager, is going to take charge. Obviously, he knows what that job is all about. He did it for 2-3 years between 16 and 18. So we'll come to that off the field situation in a moment. Colm, I know you'd listened back to the county board meeting in Westport, but on the field, there's just not much solace here. It's starting to look like one of those years.
Yeah, and just to repeat, unfortunate for Kevin McStay, he's one of the most decent people on the sidelines and has been all around. So we wish him well. The team has not really performed. They should have won the Connacht title. They should have won the Connacht final. 20 minutes to go. Backed by such a strong wind, they were level. They just couldn't push on. Now, look, that's down to Galway resilience, blocks and saves and everything else like that. But you expect a team with their know-how to get that job done. And that's 2 years running that they've lost the Connacht final by a point. And there's a sense that the season kind of tapers off after that for them both times. Okay, they got some traction in the qualifiers last year, but the Cavan result, and more so the Cavan performance, because they were 8 down. I think Aidan O'Shea got a late goal. That is not the form of a team that is going to bounce back after a provincial final defeat. Obviously, just nothing went for them. And even Ryan O'Donoghue, who'd been held scoreless from play by Niall Carlin, that's not all going well. He is their man. He is the beacon for them. And when he was tied up, that's certainly a red flag. Having said that, I'm expecting a bounce. Kevin McStay said, that's not us out there. So I expect a bounce, and they can be good in recovery. If you recall, they lost to Cork 2 years ago, coming down the straight in the qualifiers, come out and beat Galway in Pearse Stadium, now lost to Dublin after that. So they are capable of, and they expect to have a few bodies back this weekend. Maybe Paddy Durkin could be around to give them something. Maybe even Tommy Conroy. Possibility they could be on the fringes of it to just give them something else. But they're a very safe Conservative team, Joe. That's the way they've been playing, and there's no sense that they can really, really open up a team. I do think there'll be a response, but I think Tyrone coming out of Ballybuffet with a win really emboldens them, and especially after that midweek under-20 and the prospect a really thrilling prospect for spectators. Frightening one for opponents is McCurry, Dara Canavan and Owen McElhone as your three up. That's going to take watching.
It just, are we all sleeping a bit in Tyrone, Tomás?
I remember maybe a year ago when nobody was tipping them. My brother came to me and he said, Tyrone, for next year, I know they didn't. But he senses, and I know that other people sense, and it's obvious enough with the amount of talent that's coming through, that there is something there. I think everybody was from a Tyrone perspective, were happy when Malachy O'Rourke came in as manager. And I suppose it'll take him a little bit of time to get used to it as well. And they struggled at times during the league. But I do think, I think there's something seriously. They have huge talent. I think they have forwards that should thrive in this kind of with the new rules. I think defensively they're strong. I think goalie, they tick all the boxes in a lot of places. They just need, I suppose, one huge win to get it going. Like Tyrone, I think Tyrone, more so than any other team in the country, actually back themselves. And even when things are going wrong, it's just innately, it's hard to describe, it's innately built into them. Like it's not a cockiness, it's not an arrogance. Like every time we played them in the noughties, they were a difficult proposition for us. They found it hard to back it up. But once there is a spark at some stage, it seems to ignite. Is this under 20? Is the Donegal game it? Will it give them? Nobody expected them to win the All-Ireland a couple of years ago. And they did extremely well. And I think they've arguably probably a better team now than they probably did a couple of years ago. And they're certainly going to get stronger. So, look, I think, Joe, we could be here talking. And the reality is, right now, if you were forced to ask who's going to win the All-Ireland, you could make a solid argument for three teams above in the north. You could probably make an argument for Kerry. You'd probably make an argument less so for Dublin, maybe Galway as well. We don't know. We haven't a clue. I think that this quarter-final series, once they come out of here, you'll have a better idea and steer, because you can't really judge Kerry, because I don't think they've been tested on a level that other teams have been tested, like that group of death we were talking about a while ago. So I think all is positive for Tyrone at the moment, but they will certainly want to back it up with a win against Mayo. Like the one thing I always associate with the Mayo team that probably should have crossed the line but didn't cross the line was their half-forward line and their half-back line were rampant. Now, there was no score from either the last day. Rowan did well, Cohen did well in the middle of the park. The two of them were still popping over scores. Ryan O'Donoghue was held scoreless, and it's something I'll throw at Mayo all the time, is they don't have marquee forwards that you'd be afraid of from a scoring point of view. Now, I spoke about expectation earlier on. I still think that there's huge excitement, and it's not a bad thing within the fans of Mayo. There's just a hype around them, and they're expecting things from a team that I don't think are comparable to the team that they had a number of years ago that didn't cross the line, and people will argue that they should have, but I don't think this team is comparable to that team, yet the same level of expectation is dumped on them, and they seem to get heavy criticism. I suppose that criticism in every county, and it's just, I don't know, it's just there's a spotlight on Mayo at times because that they'd be seen as serial losers, and that's not the case. But at the same time, it's thrown at them, and I'd have fierce time for Kevin McStay on a personal level. He was the first fella I ever worked with inside on a night show inside in RT, and he just showed a level of compassion and just, he was a nice man. He didn't, I thought it would be different inside there, but he I remember him for it, and he's a good guy, so I'd wish him well as well.
Yeah.
Tomás mentioned the expectation around Mayo. My sense of it is that's eroding, and you can see that in the crowds that are attending their games. Obviously they lifted it for the Connacht final up there in expectation, but I think it's eroding. I don't think that same level of expectation is there, and that may be a factor too, that quite literally, I won't say people have given up on them, they're expecting a response, but beyond that I'm not sure there's much hope. But Tomás mentioned, I was talking to a seasoned GAA punter coming in here earlier, who was telling me it's the first time he has, and we'll throw this over to the bookies, 6 teams within 6-1 for the All-Ireland football title. He says, I've never seen that before. There are 6 teams that they have pitched at 6-1 or shorter.
Yeah.
So that's the general reflection. I think we would all take that from that. But those that perhaps could lose a bit of money see that way too.
Yeah. I know less now than I thought I knew 3 months ago.
Yeah.
It's blown open. The more I see, the more I don't know what's going to happen, which is great. Just on Mayo, and then we'll finish up with a quick word on Kerry Cork. It's kind of been bubbling away that there's been accusations of some kind of impropriety with the Mayo County Board and their finances. And so this, I suppose, came to something of a head on Monday night. There was a special county board meeting in Westport. Jarlath Burns and Tom Ryan, the Director General of the GAA, attended. I know you've listened back to the audio of the meeting, Colm. So there was a rejection of any impropriety. Jarlath Burns talked about a campaign of abuse and intimidation targeting the Mayo County Board officers, and they say it's been referred to the Gardaí. He said, I've been very concerned about the threats, intimidation, toxic activity that's been directed against the officers of Mayo County Board. Then Tom Ryan seemed to explain that Croke Park had taken on a loan from Mayo GAA, which had been with the banks. And in effect, under the terms of that agreement, the GAA secured a 1 million reduction in the capital value of the loan. And they extended the repayment schedule to 29 years. And so they also reduced the loan interest rate, as they, given that they're in charge of the loan now, from 3.2% to 1.9%. The net of all that is Mayo's monthly loan repayments went from 46 grand a month to 34 grand a month, meaning they're saving 150k per annum. And so that's the arrangement. GAA have stepped in, they're taking on the loan. Is that controversy abated here? Is there still a question mark? What is going on
There's
here?
probably a few factors in that. There is the emails and the tone, obviously, of the emails that have been sent to County Board. And that's one element of it. There's the element of the loan on McHale Park. There was a suggestion, there's a group of interested people in Mayo that have, examined the accounts going back many, many years, and they've raised a number of questions. Now, none of those questions were asked on Monday night. I thought there would be answers provided and questions and answers provided towards that to bring some sense. I won't say closure, but just for some insight. But the main my understanding of that meeting was this was support from Croke Park for Mayo County Board. Green light all round for their current finances too. A lot of the issues raised are legacy issues that go right back, and there is data has been gathered. A lot of significant data has been gathered, and dossiers in circulation asking those questions. And as I said, the questions weren't asked or answered specifically if you go down into the detail of that the other night. So obviously the abuse of officers was condemned. I think the GAA were very keen to throw an arm around the officers up there and say, we have your back on this. In relation to the loan, Tom Ryan was there. So it's very unusual that a president and a director general and the head of finance and audit were also there. So it was a very strong show of force from Croke Park to say to the clubs of Mayo, you're okay on this. We have you on this. That's what I took from it. The questions are still about the legacy issues are still outstanding, but I don't detect a desire from the clubs or from Croke Park to go back and explore anything to do with that. Look, county boards always, I think, and I would make this point always, in the last few years, governance, audit and risk, all of that is a lot better than what it was. And I think that's come under Tom Ryan's stewardship as Director General. One thing that he would be very strong and repeatedly reflect on in his annual report. Governance would come up quite often. But I think the digitisation of tickets and money transfers, all of that, certainly ticket sales, that's improved the governance of revenues right across the board in county. And it's probably, Mayo are in the window now, and there's a microscope on Mayo. But I think if you look at a lot of counties, practices weren't great going back over a long period of time. They're a lot better now. So I think that there were a number of issues. Tom Ryan explained the debt. He said there was a 20% write down, that there was a non-disclosure agreement with 4 banks back to 2015. I think the repayments are now 25,000. But there was a suggestion that the write down may have been 50%. Well, Tom Ryan said no, it was 5 million. there'll be $1 million knocked off that. 4 million of that would be paid back. That's my understanding of it, that there's a 20% discount, and that's what Tom Ryan explained to the delegates the other night.
Okay. Before we go, quick one, Tomás. Cork, Kerry, Porky Queeve, nice throw in time, 4:45 Saturday. Cork go and lose to Meath after their showing against Kerry, so you're like, geez, I don't know what to make of this bunch at all. Will Kerry get a test here in Porky Queeve? Are you anticipating something similar to first day out or no?
Yeah, I like, there isn't a whole, for a Kerry Cork game, I'm not hearing a whole pile of talk about it, which isn't a great sign. I think what's level at Cork, and I know it's kind of like we're coming back to the same thing. I don't want to sound patronising and everything, but they really did need to back up the performance they had against Kerry, which they should have won in normal time that night. And, you know, they go up to Park Talton and they kick 12 points, which isn't good enough, and they know that. So they're not back to square one. They know that they're capable of putting it up to Kerry. Kerry should have Paddy Clifford back, I'd imagine, this weekend, and Kerry will have been forewarned of what happened down there before. I think as the championship goes on and as these games in the next couple of weeks, Kerry need to ramp it up another level, and I think they should. So dare I say it, I find myself saying the exact same things that I was saying before the first match. Are Cork capable of upsetting? Yes, but I don't trust them to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You could kind of copy and paste that answer from the last couple of years, Colm.
Yeah, Kerry have certainly had the softer side of the draws through the qualifiers. They obviously lost to Mayo a couple of years ago, but this is a group that, you know, I think they're going to comfortably qualify from in first place, as they did last year. The Cork team that I saw in the second half in Navan last Saturday will not get near Kerry if they play like that. There's absolutely no way. It was a poor game. Cork had the wind in the second half and they were level. Meath led by 3 points, just 3 points now. I think it was 1-5 to 5 at half time. Cork had that wiped out within 7, 8, maybe 10, whatever it was, the time frame, and you would say they're going to go on and win well here. And Meath dominated after that. Felt they dominated, and I said, that's not a great standard game. Weather wasn't great, but I didn't think you wouldn't be holding out hope. Obviously they can respond and maybe in different conditions, but I think there'll be a bit of a difference between this game and that in the Munster semi-final now.
Okay. Fellas, brilliant. Colm Keys, thank you for coming to the studio. Much appreciated. And Tomás O'Shea, pleasure. Tomás, thank you.
Thanks a lot, lads.